What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today it's finally time to review the release version of ACC on this channel. It's got an actual name, it's in the title of the video, but inevitably it ain't gonna go well. I'm from the Midwest, I don't speak Italian, I'll gesticulate with my hands. Train wreck. Alright, I know what several people are probably thinking. Why am I reviewing this now? This game's been out for like 2 years at this point, I do believe, somewhere thereabouts. And the answer is because this game fell into a black hole for me. I got this game when the early access released. I enjoyed it the first time around with the Nürburgring and the Lamborghini way back when, the initial release. Over time, they added a few more cars and tracks, which I'll talk about later. And the whole thing just fell off the rails. Kind of disappeared from sim racing, it fell into a black hole, and that was that. So, I'm a little bit late to the party, but better late than never sometimes, I guess. Now, as I understand that my review style videos can sometimes get a little bit out of hand, I usually like to start off with a too long didn't watch, and here is the too long didn't watch review. ACC is really good in many key aspects. The driving is fantastic. It is fantastic. It is. There's a beautiful Italian orchestra off in the distance playing beautiful music. Type fantastic at times. The AI could use some work, but once you get them dialed in, it kind of sort of works. You know, enough-ish at least. The audio is pretty solid. Not necessarily knock your socks off, blow your eardrums out because you crank it up that much because you enjoy the sounds that much. But it gets the job done. I'm not complaining. The cars are fantastic if you're into GT3 cars, and with the DLC, GT4 cars as well. Not my cup of tea, but I can understand the appeal. You got like all of the GT3 cars, like you can't complain. And then the track listing, it's got a bunch of solid tracks, and then some tracks that absolutely suck, but they're all laser scanned, so it's not necessarily Kunos' fault. It's just I'll cover that later on in greater detail. But overall, I have to say this is a game that I would strongly suggest anyone who's just getting started with sim racing or looking for something that's an appealing package to them, and maybe they like the aspect of having a full season official game where you have all of the cars and all the liveries and the championship season mode with the points and everything, and of course all the features, the day-night cycle, 24-hour cycle, and weather, including rain. If they want that to be a thing, I would definitely recommend this game for those people. Personally, for myself, it's a little bit lacking in variety given the scope of the game, but again, that's not necessarily the game itself and its issue because it is not trying to be an everything racing simulator. It is the official game of the GT World Challenge. So there's the too long didn't watch. On to the full review. First of all, let's go ahead and start with the driving. Like I said, there are times when it is just like everything falls into place, and it is that a beautiful Italian orchestra off in the distance playing just the most beautiful music I've ever heard. And it's just like everything is right with the world. You get the car in the corner and neutral handling becomes a thing, and you power off of the corner and it's just balanced, and you can feel it in the wheel, and it's just like, this is what it's all about. This is the limit. This is what the aliens are doing, corner after corner. This is how they go fast. I need to find this feeling more often. It's actually kind of strange for me because Assetto Corsa, the original Assetto Corsa, with all of its GT3 cars, I don't recall very often having those moments where it's like everything is right and there is great happiness and balance in the world all of a sudden. I've experienced that with other racing sims out there, in particular R Factor 2 and some of the cars in Automobilista 2. But for whatever reason, perhaps because of this game's limited scope and being focused on GT3 cars pretty much exclusively, I find myself having that moment fairly often, even though I don't particularly like the feel of things like the force feedback. There's just something about it that just clicks, and I have these moments where it's like, I understand this. I need to pursue this more often to get this feeling that I desire, because then we'll also get the lap time along with it, and it just becomes this very addictive thing that is honestly very surprising. Because again, Assetto Corsa wasn't bad. I didn't have a problem with it, but I didn't have these types of moments with it. I mean, the Lexus RCF GT3 and me have been getting along fantastically, and I didn't expect that because it's not a car I particularly care for, but that thing has quickly become my go-to car in this game, even though not really a huge Lexus guy, not really a huge fan of this RCF GT3, but we just get along. We got a thing together. Now that said, there are moments where I'm just very confused. And I think what's happening actually behind the scenes or literally right in front of my face, but I'm just not noticing it. Getting into these weird low-speed, long-developing spins that I don't even pick up as a spin developing because they develop so slowly. And I think what's actually happening is a spin is developing, but because of the traction control, it's like kicking in, and I'm not perceiving that it's kicking in. I'm not seeing any like lights on the dashboard in the heat of the moment, and I'm not feeling anything through the force feedback. Obviously, without it being in the car, you're not feeling the traction control kick in and the way that would react, and just screwing me over and punishing me for it. As I've gotten more experience, more time playing the game, I've gotten more used to that, and I've avoided that, whatever that is actually, with a better regularity, but just something that I don't quite fully understand it, but it's there. One thing that I will also mention, the wallowiness. On cold tires, full tank of fuel especially, everything just feels so wallowy and sluggish. It's like you're driving around on flat tires. Like there is that much sluggishness, and I'm not really a huge fan of it. I get what's going on. Obviously, the cold tires, they're not up to pressure. They're not up to temperature. You got a full tank of fuel. The car's going to be the heaviest. Like, yeah, I understand it, but it definitely seems like excessive. Like, with low tire pressures, full tank of fuel, it is like the car is super glued to the ground and refusing to move at times. Now, as for the force feedback, the force feedback has got to be one of the most controversial things with this game. I haven't checked any, like, other reviews or forum opinions on this game lately, but yeah, it's a thing. This game, in terms of feel, if you're more familiar with other racing sims, is much more in the iRacing vein than in the R Factor 2 vein. And on one hand, I could argue that that's probably actually more realistic. You know, it's a GT3 car. It's not a freaking go-kart. It's not going to have exceptionally, harsh and super detailed force feedback, because that's not what... Why would you expect that? But at the same time, I would argue that for a racing sim, you're playing at your desk or in your cockpit, what have you, in your rig, you're not moving anywhere. Therefore, the feeling of grip through the steering wheel becomes much more important than in the real world, where you could more easily detect if your tires are sliding through other means, such as, the fuel in your backside. So I imagine it's got to be one of those things that's a bit of a mixed bag. Eventually, you just get to dealing with it, and it doesn't really matter. It just kind of is there. I think that's how force feedback generally works. I would prefer the R Factor 2 style of just give me all the detail, and I want to know precisely how much grip is there. But I've gotten used to it. Let me put it that way. Alrighty, next we come to Cars and Tracks. This game by default is the GT World Challenge Series 2018 and 2019 season, which means that you get a smorgasbord of GT3 cars with the GT3 liveries from the official series, as well as the tracks to go along with them. This is all fantastic and all. However, if you're someone like me who strongly values variety, it's lackluster. But again, it's not anything directly the fault of the game itself. It's exactly what it says it is. It's really pretty unreasonable to expect it to be anything else. So there's that. On the tracks front, yes, the tracks are laser scanned and everything. They're all done reasonably well in terms of quality. However, there are tracks in this game that are just that terrible, especially in the base content. Two of them, the worst two tracks I've ever had the displeasure of driving in a racing sim, exist in this game. And if I remember correctly, in early access, they were released back-to-back from one another, and that basically black-holed this game from my memory because I hate them that much. And those two would be Paul Ricard and the worst thing of all time that should be nuked from existence and erased from every single hard drive, all the footage erased from YouTube. Everyone get the Men in Black mind eraser treatment that this track ever even existed. Misano. Misano is the worst track I have ever had the displeasure of driving. Misano in a GT3 car, basically the equivalent of punching yourself in the nuts repeatedly. Some people may be into that. I would say that's a little weird. Get some help, please. So overall, content-wise, yeah, kind of a little weak, but I'm not going to fault it. However, you might have noticed there's a few tracks in this video because I'm just throwing the DLC in because it's December of 2020. If you're picking this game up still at this point, you need to get the DLC because the DLC somewhat fixes this issue. For example, there's the GT4 package, which adds in a whole stupid amount of GT4 cars and all the liveries to go along with it. Yes! Then you add in the Intercontinental GT package, which adds in a bunch of skins. That's cool enough on its own. However, you get 4 freaking tracks, and not just 4 freaking tracks, 4 freaking glorious tracks that will erase Paul Ricard and Misano from your mind, and you will forget that that's even a thing. You'll just skip right past them in the menu track selection. You get Suzuka, you get Laguna Seca, you get Kyalami, you get Bathurst. Alright? Like, it basically sells itself. It's a no-brainer. Like, if you don't get that package and when you pick this game up, you're doing it wrong because you're going to have, like, 20% of the circuits in the game be just absolute dog trash circuits. Not because of anything Kunos did, not because of quality issues or anything like that. Just those tracks should not exist as they do. I'm just saying. And then, of course, you add in the 2020 GT World Challenge DLC pack, which adds in updated GT3 cars, updated liveries, as well as Imola. You get to the point where it's like, okay, now this game has enough diversity and content. You have enough tracks-ish. You know, yeah, we'd all like modding support and have 8 billion different tracks and everything under the sun, but, you know, like, you got enough meat on the bone there. So I can't complain once you get the full-fledged experience. Again, if you're picking this game up in December of 2020, then just get the DLC. Wait for a Steam sale, get it all out, because that's the best way to enjoy it, and it's not even close. Just trust me on this. You need all the DLC, or just don't bother, like, honestly. Unless you're a GT3 diehard and you're really super into it. But, yeah, your mileage may vary. Now let's talk about AI, because I am an offline racer. That is what I like to do in a game like this. That isn't my main racing sim. The AI is... yeah, it's... they are actual idiots. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, you know, they kind of got to the point where, for the most part, as long as I make sure to treat them with extra respect and be particularly careful around them, like, it gets the job done. I can at least get them set up to a difficulty that meets what I need to have an enjoyment. Because what I'm looking for when I'm racing against the AI, I'm not looking to go out there and stomp the field and win races and everything like that. That's actually quite boring and trivial because you can just turn the slider down. It doesn't really mean anything. What I'm looking for is whether or not I have to make an effort. I want to try as hard racing against the AI as I do in an online race and try and run good quality race laps and do a good job and be happy and satisfied. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Overall, it's okay. There are definitely moments where the AI will suffer from what I call that one-corneritis, which is a phenomenon where the AI is just really slow in one particular corner. Therefore, you end up in this weird space where you just instantly pass everybody in that corner, and it's not fun, it's not challenging. Or alternatively, you turn up the AI strength so that way they actually go fast enough in that corner, and then they just blitz you the rest of the lap because they're like driving gurus. you know, so that's kind of an issue. And the AI is definitely not particularly advanced. You don't see a lot of advanced AI behavior out of them, things like blocking or defending positions and all sorts of stuff like that. But yeah, it kind of sort of gets the job done, if you know what I mean. Another thing I'll mention is the AI at this moment seem to be flat out broken in the rain. Like they do not care at all. I tried doing some races with the Porsche 911 GT3R, whatever it is, the latest one, the newest GT3 Porsche. And of course, you know anything about real world racing in the rain, the 911 is basically like a freaking cheat code because it's a freaking cheat code in the rain. There's a reason why one Petit Le Mans overall when it rained against freaking prototypes, because again, cheat code. And I'm just over here just like hanging on for dear life, just like sweating bullets, just like hyper concentrating, just like giving it all I got, trying to do the best I possibly can. And the AI is just casually blowing my doors off by like 8 seconds a lap, just like, oh yeah, we got plenty of grip over here. Like, yeah, no, that's it's total bull crap. So that's probably why you don't see too much in the super heavy rain conditions in this video, because the AI just does not care. They more or less ignore any sort of puddles or anything like that and just carry on about their day, which when the track gets super wet is a stupendous advantage. And honestly, this is one of the most disappointing things with the game, because driving in the rain is so much fun. It has all the visuals and the effects and everything to make racing in the rain, as well as the physics and everything, and driving in the rain and the puddles and all that. And it's like, yeah, this is fun. Some racing games out there definitely hold back from giving you a super serious, hardcore, you really don't want it to rain, believe me experience. This game fortunately delivers the you really don't want it to rain as much as you think you want it to rain experience. But the AI lets it down. Now, admittedly, this review is somewhat incomplete because online racing is something that's, well, yeah, I really don't bother with much. This game has a rating system, which is also active in offline racing, which is nice to see. It'll rate you on things like your driver safety, your pace, car control consistency, how well you know the tracks, at least to a basic, here's a little checklist type affair. And honestly, I think the rating system works fantastically. I think it's very well designed. However, I'm not sure it really has a home in a game of this scope in particular, given that you're still racing GT3 cars. The public server environment, I did a few races on just random open servers that had minimum safety requirements to join, and I'm disappointed to say that the racing seemed like exactly the same in any other public server racing environment. That is to say, there's a reason I don't do that often, because it's just not enjoyable. It is a waste of time, and I would be much better off playing against AI, which is what I do. Now, that said, there is a super serious, super official, super legit competition mode. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to jump into one of those races, because it seems like every single time I go to join the multiplayer section of this game, there's like 40 minutes until the next race is going off, and it's one of those things where I just kind of go do something else and never come back and don't particularly care, because again, this isn't my main game. It isn't the main thing I'm looking to get out, but it is there. It is good to see that's there. I'm 100% certain that you'll get very competitive races, especially as you move up the rating system and all that. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not me saying, don't bother or anything like that. It's just not for me. It's not my thing. It's never been my thing, and that's that. Now, in terms of VR support, yeah, and this is kind of where things go a little bit off the rails, if you will. When VR support initially released, again, way back in early access, is one of those things that basically killed the game for me. Put it in that black hole, never to be seen again. Along the same lines, the Unreal Engine. These two things conspired to drive me crazy. And plus Paul Ricard and Mazzano. Again, nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. First of all, VR. Yes, VR is supported. It works, technically. It gets the job done. However, on the OG Oculus Rift that I rock, I can honestly say this game is absolutely terrible to play in VR, and I would not suggest it, to be entirely honest. The image quality that I was experiencing was just terrible. Like, everything lacking definition, lacking any sorts of tonal depth, everything just kind of gray, flat, bleh, you know. There was no detail even with the limited resolution. Like, comparing to other racing sims out there, these are things that I've never really had an issue with, but this game was literally like, wow, this is terrible. And then you add in the Unreal Engine, which even when you're not playing in VR, it's still a thing because it powers the graphics. If you're familiar with the Unreal Engine from many other games, you know, it's very popular, very commonly used for a good reason, don't get me wrong. But one of the things that always drives me crazy with this engine powering the graphics, you see the texture streaming and all that stuff, and just kind of the general wonkiness that goes with, load in, and you'll be looking at, N64 quality textures, then it pops up to like PlayStation 1, then PS2, then PS3, and then you finally get the actual textures as intended. Like, you see these things, and it grinds my gears. You also have the image quality at a distance. I definitely do not feel is as good as the competition. And yeah, the game looks like 10 billion times better than the competition, don't get me wrong. But I do miss that extra sharpness and clarity. And I do think Kunos kind of understands that, given the fact that within the menus there's like 4 different sharpening options. Like, I think it's clear they kind of understood it, but the engine that they're working with, that they decided to go with, does have that weak spot in that area. One additional thing I'd like to mention here before I wrap things up, I'll play a clip at the end of the audio as I usually do in these videos, but I strongly feel like the trackside audio in particular is a little bit underwhelming because it sounds like they really tried to make sure that you could hear cars way off in the distance screaming through the forest, like you can at the real track. However, at the same time, because of that, the tonal depth just isn't there because they just don't have the dynamic range while doing that, and also having a loud car drive right past the camera. That works at the racetrack because you can crank it up to like 9 billion decibels and your ears can bleed and we all enjoy it, whereas not many people are doing that at home because there does become a point where there's just excessive volume, and race cars are excessive volume. That's what you kind of like, but you don't get the same feeling. You guys understand what I'm talking about. It's just a thing. It's not a major issue by any means. And overall, I would say the sounds are quite good in this game, especially when you go to a track like Bathurst and you hear the front splitter scraping all over the place, which is just, again, it just makes me happy. So wrapping things up, this game gets a recommendation from me. I really do have a good time with it, especially, again, with all of the DLC added in. It does provide a bit more content and variety for me to be interested in, and I will continue to play this game and enjoy it because it is fundamentally very fun, especially the driving aspect. That core thing that makes up such a large portion of a racing sim is quite well sorted, and I have a blast just driving around because me and that Lexus have a thing. I don't know, but we do. But along the same lines, if you're someone who's looking for a new racing sim, or they're new to sim racing and you just haven't found, you just don't know which way to go, this is probably a game that I would rate very highly, especially for those types of players, because you do have that full GT3 grid where you have a wide variety of cars, which, they're GT3 cars and they'll do similar lap times because they're GT3 cars, and they'll behave kind of sort of similar in terms of performance because they're all GT3 cars. You do still have a good variety. The Audi handles differently than the Porsche, the handles differently than the Lexus, handles differently than the BMW, and on and on. There is definitely details there, and I think it'll help you find something that is, your thing, even within the same category. So, honestly, for that type of player, this game would probably be my top recommendation because it does give you something to whet the appetite and a good experience to learn in, especially with these being GT3 cars and ABS traction control being a thing and very beginner friendly in general, as well as plenty of default setups to go around, so you get that as well, so you can have a safer setup right out of the box, and then when you feel a little bit more talented, when you've progressed a little bit as a driver, you can maybe go into those aggressive setups and let the beast loose. But yeah, I will say, just random thing, it's always fun for me to do these videos, especially a video like this for a game that's been out for like a year and a half, but everybody just probably expects me to more or less cover at some point just because sim racing, because I don't really pay attention to other opinions that are out there. So for all I know, this is like the most hated game and something happened like a year and a half ago and turned away everybody from the community. But as far as I can tell, this game's perfectly fine and I enjoy it, and then like highly rated. I would recommend it. So hopefully I'm not outside the mainstream there and I'm just the one wacko who's been having a good time for whatever reason. But yeah, that's that. I think we might get this one in under 30 minutes. Yeah. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. All right, bye.